Louisiana versus all y'all, Jarrett Rose with a couple of quick takeaways from LSU's 44-21 defeat of Nicholls State on Saturday, September 7th in Tiger Stadium. And I guess I'll start where LSU coach Brian Kelly started in the post-game press conference with some credit to Nicholls State, who showed up to Tiger Stadium for the first time and were ready to compete at that level and give LSU some trouble, a team that theoretically should have overmatched the Colonels just from an SEC to FCS standpoint and some of the differences in resources and talent dynamics and whatnot there. But that Tim Rebowe-led program, once again, able to compete at a high level. You talked about it on an episode of Podnas last week going into the Louisiana Tech game up in Ruston, that the Colonels were going to be a pesky opponent for that FBS Bulldogs team up there. And they gave Louisiana Tech some fits. They gave LSU quite a bit of fits on Saturday night as well. Left a lot of frustration for folks in purple and gold in that matchup. And Colin Guggenheim, the former John Curtis quarterback, now a running back for the Colonels, was a big piece of that. He had the career-long 67-yard touchdown run in the third quarter, ends up with 145 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 25 carries. That's not been uncommon for Nicholls State, regardless of who they're playing against. And so I think probably a lot of LSU fans find out a little bit about Colin Guggenheim for the first time on Saturday night when he has a chance to come up to Baton Rouge and do it in Tiger Stadium. But that's, the type of player he is and the type of performance he's capable of putting out there. Pat McQuaid, the quarterback, an efficient 12 for 16 for 113 yards, just kind of did what he needed to do most often to kind of keep the chains moving. And so a lot of positive takeaways for them, including Brian Kelly admitting afterward that he felt like Nicholls for a lot of the night was the more physical team and kind of controlled some things, controlled time of possession, ends up with a 3-minute edge. That was, a bigger disparity for chunks of that game. And that's where I guess you start to transition to, for LSU, great. You turn things on down the stretch, open that thing up and win 44-21. But it just felt like such a funky night in terms of performance and vibes, even post-game, just sort of the way that Brian Kelly approached some of his comments and talking about how the team looked fatigued and they were, tired after a short week coming back from that emotional loss to USC and all those things. And there's something to be said for that, but obviously part of the equation is being prepared to not have that be the case. You're going to have turnarounds and have to play every single week pretty much all season. And this was a game where you go in and, you're supposed to be far better suited from a roster standpoint and resources and all those things to go out and handle this game. And instead, Nicholls State was right on LSU's heels well into the third quarter of that game until really Garrett Nussmeier and Kyron Lacey were able to kind of put on a show at some times, and you started to see a little bit better performance in the trenches on both sides of the ball to help take control and hold Nicholls State to that 21 points. And so credit to LSU for finishing the game this week in a strong way. That was obviously something that was frustrating for them a week ago against the Trojans, but they worked through some of the frustrations for the first 2.5 quarters of this game to be able to lock it down there down the stretch. It's just going to be interesting to see how this team grows and how quickly this team grows, because now they head on the road in SEC play up to South Carolina this week. It'll be on College game day. And so a lot has to be progressed really quickly. And all the leaders on this team, talking to Mason Taylor and Greg Penn and company, all afterward, they said that there is an understanding of the strides that need to be made. And it's just a matter of executing some things, a little bit more cleanly, that they're not making excuses. They're not talking about this being a fatigued team, that they just need to execute some things better on a Saturday night. And so they'll have another opportunity to do so here this week. Brian Kelly said he still believes that this team can be a really good football team this season. I think there is certainly something to be said for that. A couple of notes he mentioned, if you take out that 67-yard run by Guggenheim, then Nicholls, who is an incredibly effective rushing team, is is suddenly, down around 3 yards a carry, which you'd love to be that much lower as an FCS opponent if you're an LSU fan, but is a lot more manageable than what it ends up looking like at the end, where because of that big run, Nicholls State is on its way to damn near tripling LSU on the ground. And that play, even, it looks like kind of a simple situation of, from my vantage point, that a linebacker kind of overruns a gap, doesn't squeeze a gap with some of the things that you're trying to do up front for LSU, and leaves that lane open, and Guggenheim does what he does, and makes the most of that lapse, and is off to the races a little bit. And then on the flip side, as concerning as that 64-yard rush total is for LSU, and you'd love to see them be able to dominate up front as an offensive line and control things on the ground with this rushing attack that we expect it to be a really big piece of this offense, that the LSU coach and players after the game were talking about the fact that there was a lot as well that they may have been going to the line expecting run, but because of what they saw from the defense and some of the numbers that Nicholls was putting in the box to force LSU to throw, that they checked out of some things and took to the air, where Garrett Nussmeier ends up becoming just the third quarterback in LSU history to throw for 6 or more touchdowns in a game. Joe Burrow holds the record with his 7 against Oklahoma in that 2019 national semifinal. Burrow also had 6 against Vanderbilt on the road that season. Jaden Daniels had 6 against Georgia Southern at home last season. And so great company for Garrett Nussmeier with 6 touchdown passes in a single game, completes 27 of 37 for 302 yards. That's, nearly 3/4 of his passes. Kyron Lacey really involved. And so a lot to like from where they're clicking from a passing game standpoint. You'd certainly just love to see some more consistency with being able to establish the run, clean up some of those mistakes and contain the run against the Nicholls State team, knowing that the level of competition is about to ramp up drastically the rest of this season. That's not a knock to Nicholls State at all. It's just a credit to what the rest of this SEC slate is about to look like for the Tigers. Obviously, Nicholls State tried to control a lot on the ground, but did attempt 22 passes, and LSU wasn't able to create a whole lot of pressure up front on the other side of the ball either. I guess sliding over to those defensive numbers, you're looking at 0 sacks, 2 tackles for loss, 1 quarterback hurry. And so those are all numbers that you would expect to be better for an LSU defense against an FCS opponent. Probably as concerning to me as anything coming out of Saturday night was just how banged up this LSU team continues to look. We talked last week about losing John Emery. Chris Hilton's still trying to work his way back. Kyle Parker has been banged up. And now Jacobian Guillory looks like, according to reports, he may be out for the season after suffering injury on Saturday. There was a point where Nussmeier had to leave. He was banged up on Saturday. Same thing with Kyron Lacey. Jordan Allen, who had already been banged up going into the weekend, had to be looked at and helped off a little bit at one point. And so that, when you look at where this team was from a health standpoint, week and a half, 2 weeks ago, where Brian Kelly talked about how well they were coming through camp in terms of having everyone available, really disappointing for those guys that have been banged up, guys like Emery, Guillory, and Princeton Malbrew, those 3 who it sounds like are out for the season in particular. Just hate to hear that for those guys, all of whom have worked their tails off to be leaders in their respective, position rooms and on this team. And then from an overall team standpoint, you get thin in a hurry there at the running back spot when Emery looked like the most effective guy in that room coming out of the USC game. And so you end up moving a freshman former quarterback, arrives to camp and works at DB in Juwan Johnson. He's now at running back. And so that's promising. And suddenly a defensive tackle position where you were a little bit uncertain coming into the year, and looked at Jacobian Guillory as the biggest certainty that was a leader for that group and a leader for that defense. You could build some things around. Now suddenly you're without him. And so it's tough on top of, for those guys, it's tough from a football standpoint to continually be shuffling on the fly this much, this early, when you've faced 2 opponents, one an FCS team where you end up with a lot of your starters playing well into the 4th quarter in that game. So we'll see. it's college football, or it's football in general. There's another game fast approaching. They just keep on coming for months on end. And so how this team responds to the season opening loss and now in a home opener where they felt they left some things to be desired, how they respond and go open SEC play now. It'll be a new week, and they'll have that opportunity to take a step forward and look that much better. And we'll look forward to seeing exactly what kind of steps they're able to take now moving forward from week 1 to week 2. Make sure you keep up with the Louisiana versus All Y'all channel. Hit that subscribe button below. We'll talk a little bit more about this Nicholls State game, as well as this upcoming South Carolina game, on some episodes of Podnas with Daniel Hawks this week, as well as have some interviews with Brian Kelly and some of the players throughout the week. As always, thanks y'all for stopping by. Until next time, y'all be well. I'm Jarrett Roser. This is Louisiana versus All Y'all.